Can I just ask Anne and her colleagues to join us at the table for the public forum? And I've just spoken with Anne and indicated, this is just for the meeting's information, that I will look to, when we go to confirm the agenda, to bring the report on the courthouse that's in the agenda up to the front of the agenda so that any members of any of this group who wish to stay don't have to sit through 2 finance reports and an insurance report before they get to it. Which, given the number of billable minutes is sitting at the end of the table, would be extraordinary. The city will grind to a halt. All right. And look, I'm not strictly clear as to whether you're an individual or a group presenting, but given there's more than one of you up there, we'll treat it as a group, even if not in the legal sense, and give you 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for... I'm on? Yeah. Thank you very much for allowing me to come and speak to this committee. I don't think I'm probably talking to the converted here when I say that the cause here is to have our courthouse at number 1 Stewart Street up and running again as soon as possible. The reasons for that I've set out in the paper that I hope you were all able to receive either this morning or on Friday. That's paper where I've helpfully put a different photograph of the courthouse at the top of each page, just so none of you lose sight of the fact that this is probably one of the most iconic buildings in Dunedin, along with the registry building and the railway station, and it speaks for itself in terms of its importance to our city and its future. It's a mark of difference for this town. It provides part of that special character that is created in that historic precinct and in the university that brings people from all over the world to Dunedin, that is used, for example, as a marketing tool by the law faculty, because who wouldn't want to be admitted to the bar? And there's some of us here who have been admitted to the bar. There's Kate and Hilary, to name some, who were admitted in that courtroom, and we are, of course, proud when we go around New Zealand. We say we're Otago graduates, and we were admitted in the Dunedin High Court. But I don't come here as a lawyer, I come here as a member of our community. I've lived in Dunedin since 1981, and one of the principal attractions is that this is a beautiful city. Without that building, it would not be the same. If it was allowed to fall into disrepair or disuse, then of course it would lose a lot of its significance. It is full of history. We all know of famous jurists and cases that have been decided there. And so it has a very special flavour as the oldest functioning, well, it was until a few weeks ago, functioning High Court in New Zealand. There are, of course, other heritage buildings that are just as valuable, and you could say, well, why does this one particularly matter? Because it's part of a group. They form a particular area of Dunedin City. You just have to walk down towards the railway station and you see the foot traffic heading in that direction. The cameras are out. There are people from all over the world taking home photographs of the Dunedin courthouse. And I'm sure the people who see them all over the world from their friends and relatives who have been here are impressed by that beautiful building. So hopefully I am talking to the converted that you see the importance of that building. Now, the next matter I wanted to go on to is the level of community support. So particularly with Malcolm Wong's support, because he's had a lot of expertise in this area and gathering support and building people to move in one direction. And of course, one direction is critical here, that there not be disparate voices, but there be one voice. We have gone to different groups such as the Otago Chamber of Commerce, such as the university, the alumni, and the Chinese community, and spoken to different groups and asked them for their support. It's been unreserved. It's been quite extraordinary, the level of support. The alumni response was far too great to be able to send you. It's 100 people from all over the world. And there was one in particular, I mean, there are so many good ones, but there was one in particular that I wanted to read to you. It's from Judge Oak Blakey, who many of you will have met in different roles that he performed when he lived in Dunedin. He said that, "I wish to offer my fulsome support for the retention and necessary strengthening of the Dunedin Courthouse. My association with the majestic building is as follows. As a former law student partaking lectures in the 1960s in the upstairs room, being sworn in as a barrister and solicitor, as a solicitor practicing in Hamilton instructing Dunedin colleagues and counsel to appear, as a district court judge from 1985 to 2003, during which time I vacated chambers to enable a replacement family court to be established in the refurbished Stewart Street Court from the John Wycliffe site. I'm now fully retired, living in Nelson for the last 10 years. I have sat as a temporary warrant sitting judge in nearly all the district courts throughout the country. I'm in a strong position to compare the Dunedin court building with all others. It is unique, quite unlike any other court of similar size and function. It exudes history, splendour, and dignity befitting of its function." And to us, that's a critical factor. This is a building created for its function, and it worked. It worked beautifully. It really worked well. We are a major judicial centre, not anywhere near as big as Waitakere or Manukau or those northern type cities, but we are important, and that building serves its function really well. There are no good reasons for it not to continue in use. There are many, many reasons for its use to continue. Just did a tour with the Ministry of Justice officials. It was at 12:30 today. Put my hard hat on and my high-vis vest and went through the building, looked at the core samples that they've taken. It was pretty impressive, actually. That brickwork's holding together jolly well, better than some of us. So I was impressed. It looks solid, that old girl. They're talking about a huge job. They're talking about a business plan maybe in August, a year maybe to get that to Cabinet, 2 years in to do the work, but there's no commitment. They say that they all want to do that, but it's subject to cost. And to quote Nicola Wong here, Malcolm's wife, she said, "The government is reducing the dispensing of justice to a business case." That building, in my submission, here I go, is far too important to be left to a business case. It's not economics, I would suggest, but it's importance. Where there's a will, there's a way, and in my submission, this council can be very much part of that will, can put forward the way, can provide some of the expertise and support to ensure that it happens, provide a lot of the pressure, both moral and politically, because although electorally we are a small district, we have been known to achieve things through sheer volume. We can create the noise, we can be that squeaky wheel, and that's why we're here, to ask the council to provide that level of noise that will ensure this happens. Some of the support we have received is from such diverse members of the community as the Chinese Gardens Trust, the Allied Press, the Southern Heritage Trust, to name just a few. So this council can be entirely confident that they would have broad community support for a motion to put political pressure on central government and to set up what I suggest would be a good way forward as a strategic task force here as to how that can best be achieved. So those were the matters I wanted to mention orally.
Thank you, Anne. I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the trouble to come along today, and also, more importantly, for the work that you've already done to raise the profile of this issue. I hope there aren't many around the table who would disagree with the sentiments you've expressed, but I wanted to address some of the issues that you've raised in your other interesting reading you sent to us this morning in terms of some of the content of the Opus report. But before I do that, I wonder if you could make some comment about the functionality of the replacement. You've said to me that there are issues around entry, waiting rooms and those sort of things, and the shared space for both victims and offenders, and that sort of practicality that's far from ideal, but you haven't mentioned that in your presentation. Could you share that a wee bit with the council, please?
Well, there are difficulties with the temporary courthouse, but I suppose the view that I've taken as somebody who appears there almost every weekday is that we just have to make it work if it's going to ensure that we get back in. I could list some real problems with the building, but as long as it has that word temporary in front of it, and the more temporary it is, the better, then we just lump it.
I ask because some of the issues around the expenditure on alternates are hard to understand when you read in the Opus report towards the end that their estimates for the phase 1 and phase 2 strengthening, and they're known as being pretty conservative in what they think might need to be done, is only just over $4 million. And it seems to me that some of the expenditure that is identified by Opus for strengthening pales into insignificance compared with the money that's already been sunk in the first part of the restoration that was completed in 2002 or whenever it was, 14 million, plus the replacement buildings in the current High Street site, but also John Wycliffe and the old BNZ historically, and also other transport issues around what's going on right now. Is that a fair observation?
Well, I would suggest that the Opus report would be viewed as out of date now, and the costings as well, because a lot of information has come out of Christchurch's problems, and so how they strengthen things now would be different to how they viewed them in 2011. So I think those figures would have to be kept in that context, that all the lessons that they have taken from those events in Christchurch and the strengthening they've had to do there have changed how they approach the matter now. They would be mainly tying the building to itself. So they can't, their view is that they can't just strengthen the tower, that they have to strengthen the whole building, because the tower on its own wouldn't be able to sustain the impact of the other parts moving on it. So that is the logic that has just been explained to me in the meeting I've had. I don't know the merits of it. I would have to defer to an engineer on that, but that's certainly their reasoning and why they would say those figures were out of date.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming along today, Anne. I haven't unfortunately had time to read your document because we've only just been given it, but in the papers that we have been given, it says that the Department of Courts have reported that parts of the building are between 15 and 20 MBS, which is what's not acceptable. A great chunk of it, I understand, is above 34, which is fine.
Yep.
The parts that you talked about, obviously the tower would be one of them. Are there any other parts that you know of that really do fall well below an acceptable safety standard?
If you look at the last page of the Opus report, if you have that there, it seems to be that only the tower is the lowest.
Okay.
NBS.
But you've just said that I was hoping that if we could just do the tower first, we could do the rest of the building in sections, but you're just saying that because they're all interrelated, that's not going to be possible.
There are three buildings tied together. So there's quite a modern building on Dunbar Street.
Yep.
Which used to be the old CIB, and then there's the two older parts that were the High Court number 1 court and number 2 court, and then the law library upstairs, and they're the older parts, and it's them that all have to be tied together to support the tower.
Okay, now we all know that the court has moved out of there for some number of months now, and it says in our report that nothing's actually happened in terms of doing the building up. Do you know why?
Well, it was only at the meeting today, because that's the first time the ministry has ever invited us to meet with them, that it was revealed just how much work they're doing behind the scenes in terms of they have a panel of engineers, and they have been looking at how best to restore it. They said that they had had other priorities for many years, such as Christchurch, and then Masterton, and then Manukau, courts which they had prioritised above Dunedin, and I think Waitakere is still very high up there. These are all courts that are very busy or have strengthening problems. So we have been a bit down the list, and so did get put to one side, and there wasn't a lot of work done for a long time. But Glenn's report, I'm not sure who actually came out as the author of that report, but the report that I read that Glenn had a lot to do with Mr. Hazelton sets out that history very well for you.
So, but today you have had confirmation that they are actively working on it, that they've actually got engineers and that it's now come to the top of their list.
That's what they said. They say there'll be a business plan in August. I think the part where there becomes a difficulty is when that business plan goes to Cabinet, because it becomes a dollar thing. And so
Right.
I would be seeking that the motion be to the effect that this building is so important, it's not dollars and cents, it's important for many, many reasons, historic, business for Dunedin, all sorts of things.
And what specific thing should we be now doing, given that we're all of a similar accord? I'm assuming that. What action would you specifically like us to take? Do we need to start hassling our ministers?
Yes. Well, we're seeking that there be two motions today. One, that there is that commitment by this council to put that moral and political pressure on those in central government to commit to restoring that building, to strengthening it, so it's a functioning building again. So they make the commitment and not have this rider about cost, and that that we have a local council-based strategic task force devoted to ensuring that that pressure is not a one-off, but is continuing, because that is the only way we see as ensuring that it will be followed through on.
Thank you.
Councillor Vandervis asked my question. Thank you.
The last hearing I went to in the High Court was the admission of my niece to the bar, where we had to unfortunately go to an alternative site, and then we all went under the tower to have a photo taken, which is a bit bizarre considering it's the tower that is the bit that's at risk, and understanding the liability that the ministry have if something were to happen to people on that street. Because while I want to get you all back in there, there is an inherent risk around that area in the meantime to anyone walking on that street, which is our responsibility as a city as well. And just understanding what the ministry think about that, because it's not as just excluding you from it isn't, the law practitioners from it isn't sufficient. It's actually the danger that they place on the street as well, which isn't being mitigated by inaction. They didn't say anything about that management of net risk and their duty to the citizens of Dunedin?
Not at all.
I see here on page 3, it says that the tower has had a steel structure put on it, so it's not
Are
actually...
you on the Opus report?
Geotechnical, yeah.
The
It says-
geotechnical report?
Yeah, it says that the steel structure is in the tower, but it's not on the ground floor, so do we need the tower strengthened, or do we just need to continue right down to the ground?
Well, their view now is that it needs to be strengthened, the whole building needs strengthened, that just taking the strengthening down to the ground for the tower in isolation wouldn't be sufficient.
Yeah, so
And that is why they're saying that it's, well, the Minister, Amy Adams, said when she was here that she couldn't make a commitment. She would take it to her cabinet colleagues, but it would be north of 10 million. So it depends what you want to do as to what your cost is.
It's partial strengthening there already. It's just got to be tied together and the ground floor done.
Yes, and because it's an historic places Category 1 building, there are restrictions. You can't just gut it and put some steel struts in. You have to do it respecting the existing interior. So a lot of the courtrooms are 2 levels high, and that has its own problems in terms of strengthening and maintaining its historic structure. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, there's no...
And you referred earlier to the seismic upgrade that was done in 2003, which is referred to in the report we got from Dr. Hazelton. And I understand that the subsequent assessment in 2011 was informed by the experience of Canterbury. However, I understand also that last year, or a little more than a year ago, the ministry was ready to go out to tender. So now they need a business case. So what I don't understand is what's changed between their understanding of, say, a year ago and now.
The answer is, in a word, I don't know. They said today, when taking us through the building, that there hadn't been any seismic strengthening done in 2001, which was not my understanding from talking to people like Russell Lund, who was a contractor. So that was a bit of an eye-opener. If that's correct, that would mean that, or that would create a different scenario. I don't know what's the difference between the architectural plans that they had that are referred to in Dr. Hazelton's report and now.
What I'm getting at is that presumably, if I'm correct, and this is what I'm told, that they were ready, and we have evidence that they were ready to go out for tender about a year or a bit ago, that would be on the basis of the 2011 assessment.
That would seem logical.
And subsequent to that, government's requirements into the future anyway, with regard to earthquake strengthening, if anything, for Dunedin have relaxed.
They've given a greater window, yes.
So
35 years.
What I'm trying to get to an understanding of is what's changed between a year or 18 months ago when they had done the assessment, they'd worked out what needed to be done, they were going to go out for tender, and now they're not. You don't know the answer?
No, and they did concede today that they had not been good at communication. I pointed out that it took me 3 years and an ombudsman to get the geotechnical report. They said their answer is always that these things are commercially sensitive. But I said, well, it creates a climate where one is suspicious, becomes suspicious and think that nothing's been done. So I'm sorry, I can't assist you because, as the report indicates, there had been approaches for consents. The plans were at that point of specificity, and yet it just was pulled away from that architectural firm.
It may well be that it's to do with quantum because over a certain amount, certainly in health, once it gets above a certain figure,
it has to go to cabinet.
It has to go to cabinet.
It may be, but it was taken off that firm, as the report points out. But hopefully this body can find out.
All right, thank you. Look, no doubt we're going to revisit this very shortly. So thank you, and please feel free to stay. But we'll look to move, as I said, that item up the account. Perhaps with the permission of the rest of the meeting, are other people comfortable for people to remain? Because there may well be there's further questions that arise in the course of that report, and it would seem more sensible to. So please just feel free to stay where you are.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have no apologies. I do. Correct. apologies have been received. It says quite plainly here from Councillors Lord and Wiley. I'll move that those apologies be accepted. Thank you. Those in favour? Against? Carried.